Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik Johansson, a teacher with LSAT Demon, and joining me, I am thrilled to have LSAT Demon student Izah, who has crushed the LSAT, and applications are now in, right?
Yes, as of yesterday.
Awesome. Congratulations. So I won't press you on that since you don't know yet, but excited to hear in the weeks and months that come how that all that shakes out for you. But yeah, let's talk about how you got here. Let's cut to the end. What was the score that you ended up getting?
I ended up with a 169.
Awesome. And that's coming from where?
That is coming from a baseline of a 146, although I did then take other tests where I scored below a 146. So
Okay. So you took a diagnostic 146 and then had official tests that were below that?
so I took a diagnostics.
I see.
I guess my first one was a 146. I took a couple weeks to start studying. And then it actually dipped to I think a 144. And
Okay.
I totally freaked out. And then, through the rest of the year, it's gotten just up and up since there.
Very normal. Sure. Well, when you got that 146 and when you first started on your LSAT journey, tell me about how you felt. Was it surprising to you? Was it what you expected? Or did you have any preconceptions about the LSAT before you started?
I did. I think I came in with some really bad preconceptions about the LSAT, which is part of how I found the demon because I kind of like heard word of mouth from somebody else who was very test anxious, I guess, that the demon was a good solution. So going in, I kind of had a preconceived notion that like if you scored beneath a certain baseline, like it wasn't even worth trying. There was no point to even getting started because you were just like, you don't have the aptitude, you're not a good fit. And
Oh,
so my mind, just like based off of some like I don't know, like maybe Reddit research, I was like, okay, 130 is the cutoff. Like if I'm not above 130, like I just shouldn't even try.
mm-hmm.
Um, which I think put a ton of pressure on the score in the beginning, which is like a terrible, terrible way to do it after kind of having a year of score variance and kind of plateaus and then improvements. So I came in just extremely stressed, I would say. It was
Mm-hmm.
all daunting. And I think a big part of my LSAT journey has been like letting go of the feeling of the LSAT and just doing it.
Yeah. Was there any, it sounds like some of that feeling and some of that pressure predated your actual LSAT study. Was there any shift from the moment that you started? Because I mean, just speaking from experience, I had no idea what the test even was, and then I got started, and I was fortunate enough that I was like, oh, this all just feels like stuff I was already pretty good at. So, or at least it feels doesn't feel foreign to me. It feels like something I could get better at. So was there any like demystifying, or did it feel more approachable once you actually started, or did that was that also the process of LSAT prep, just making it
Yeah,
more
I think it was
approachable?
maybe like slightly more incremental,
Yeah.
just because I came in just so like hot, like emotion wise, I guess.
Mm,
Um, and so I think like the beginning part of my studying life, like for the first 2 months, where I really wasn't like making improvements, I was just kind of like building the foundational knowledge to be able to then take it again, or like take another practice test, not take the official one. Was kind of like getting used to the feeling of sitting down and taking like an exam that long, and also like getting comfortable with the idea that my score wasn't going to be the determinant of everything, and that like I really needed to become a little bit less like number sensitive.
mm,
And so there was a lot of like I did feel like it was something that I could improve at, obviously, and I think there was a lot of reason to believe that, but I think I carried a lot of stress about like the specific numbers that could be improved. Like I think I had in my mind like, oh, I'm coming from below average, and like it would be pretty shocking to get 10 points. It would be even more shocking to get 15 or 20. Like this is going to look different than what I thought I might be capable of. And then now I sit here and I'm like, that was all nonsense. Like all
yeah.
turned out not to be true. And like I was so stressed for no reason. Like but you just that's the learning process. It always
Yeah.
seems in hindsight.
Yeah. But you were intimidated to sit down and take just a practice test.
For sure. Yeah, well, and I mean, so the LSAT for me, like coming from my background, it's like probably the main standardized test I've taken since like high school. And like I was like probably a 50th percentile like SAT taker. Like I've never been a good standardized test taker and I've never like really studied for a
Hmm.
standardized test before. Like I think that was a very opaque process and I just decided I was a bad test taker and would try not to take tests.
Hmm.
So this was all very new.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple months after you first started studying where things felt like they weren't really progressing for you, like you had some fears to overcome, you weren't really feeling much progress. When did you start to feel that progress?
I think so I think it was actually pretty specific. I started studying in September. I did a month of study with Khan Academy, which was not fruitful.
Hmm.
That's when I like at the end of my month of study, I got that lower score and was like, okay, I'm an idiot. Like, what the hell is happening to me? And then I kind of took a couple weeks and researched the field of what kind of like prep was available and settled on the Demon and was very happy with where things started going from there. And then I think um, I started taking live classes in October, I guess, of last year. Settled into just taking the classes and not doing any kind of like timed or scored tests. Like I really was just taking an hour or 2 hours of like live classes in the evenings and then doing the drill button like during the rest of the day. And then last year I was also studying for games, but that's obviously no longer relevant.
Very
And I started
sad.
feeling improvement. I started feeling improvement in logical reasoning and reading prompt probably in like the third month. And it took me a little bit longer with games. It was not as intuitive for me.
Sure.
Uh, but I think it was like, I think the kind of like no nonsense approach started to work in maybe like the third month of studying where I was like, oh, okay, like for some of these flaw questions, like the more simple flaw questions, like I totally get what like, Nathan is talking about when he says like this is so dumb. Like I'm starting to feel like it actually is dumb and I'm not dumb for not getting it.
Right. Totally.
It was
Yeah.
huge. And that was the feeling. And then, like I kind of protected myself from looking at too many scores because it just wigged me out so bad that I just like decided that I was gonna kind of take a little bit more of a piecemeal approach in the beginning and kind of not take full length scored practice tests until maybe month 4 or 5.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And it's the most important thing to do is just learn that it's one question at a time that you can solve. And what you described, getting to that point where you can read it and be like, oh, well, this is really stupid. That's when it starts to be fun. When you start to feel smarter than the test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I think a big feeling shift for me was when I started to just be able to run through like the first 10 questions on an LR section and be like, nothing has tripped me up. Like all of this is kind of what I expect from the test. Like it is new because they're obviously always new, but like the logic underlying them, like I couldn't tell you exactly what it is yet, but I know what it is when I see it. Like I
Yeah.
know that it's like the kind of flaw that we're starting to work with. And then, I think by the end of studying, like I could tell you, all the like technical, like question type, whatever kind of typical flaws you see, like all of that
Sure.
stuff. But beginning, it was good that I just like there was a pattern and I was seeing it.
Yeah. Didn't need to overcomplicate it. It was just like
No, and
careful reading
overcomplicating
and
it, I think that was a big like that was really important that it wasn't overcomplicated in classes, because it would have been too intimidating. Like I carried enough like lack of confidence at that point in my ability to just do it that if I needed to like memorize terms or question types, I would have been totally overwhelmed and would have just like
yeah.
stepped back from it.
Yeah. If it felt like a bunch of book learning you had to do instead of just working on a pretty simple skill.
Yeah, and just like I mean, I think one of the like pieces of advice that I think I actually absorbed through the podcast was like you just kind of need to see volume. Like you don't really need to worry about a lot of this stuff. Like even like the dashboard numbers and all of that is like it actually kind of becomes helpful a lot later in the game than you think. Like, you're
Mm.
sensitive to it in the beginning, but it's not useful information until you've just done a ton of this stuff. So that was like a huge hurdle for me to overcome.
Speaking of hurdles to overcome, eventually you did start taking timed practice tests and timed sections again. So talk to me about how those got reintroduced.
Yes. So that was kind of like, I think that was the most maybe like academic approach to the whole process, because I was like, I am I am extremely anxious about this. I've been extremely anxious about the score the whole way through. And I think it was like the 6 month mark. So I studied for a year for context. I think it was about like the 6 month mark where I was like, okay, like I do need to get used to seeing these things, and I need it to not bother me as much. Like if I get something wrong, I need that to not like throw off the rest of the project. And so I started with doing timed sections and just committing to doing like a really focused time section and then a very, very thorough review. And in the beginning, I was even reviewing the questions that I got right.
Mm.
Like I would bookmark. I think I just bookmarked anything that I like wasn't 100% confident on,
Yeah.
and kind of committed to like, you just have to review all of them, like correct or incorrect. Like if you're reviewing like 16 questions that you got right, then that's a great feeling, but like you
Mm.
weren't sure when you took it. So like this has to be reviewed.
Yeah.
Uh, and that got me a little bit more comfortable with like some version of a score without it being like the big one, you know? Because I could start seeing my like accuracy and whatever. I don't know, what do you guys call like the -5, -2? I guess that's just your score.
Yeah. Your section score.
Section score. Yeah, section score. And then I think probably like month 7 or so, I started just like sitting down and taking a full length practice test. And I committed to not reviewing it at all on the day that I took it, which
Mm.
was a little bit of like a learning lesson for me, because I think I was on the verge of burning out because I felt like I should take a test on a weekend day and then also like start reviewing while it was fresh in my mind or something, which was misguided because that's too much LSAT, I think,
Sure.
in a day.
It's a tough balance to find because I think ideally, yeah, you review everything as soon as you can after you make the mistake so that you can diagnose, well, what was I thinking at the time? And hey, you have the memory of what your thought process was, so you can dig into that. On the other hand, like you said, if your review is going to be unproductive because you're tired or you are beating yourself up over a bad score, even though you shouldn't, have those feelings, then yeah, you don't want to sacrifice quality review because you're not in the right headspace for it. So, no, I think that speaks to you just checking in on how you were feeling, what was realistic for you on a given day. Um, did you did that feeling of burnout come at various points throughout your study, or was that something that you hit at one point and then you needed to like step back?
No, I
It's
mean, I think I approached burnout probably 4 or 5 times through the process. Like, and I think I was careful not to like fully get there because I knew it would be very difficult to come back from. And I knew enough from like the podcast and classes that that was something that could happen. So I was aware of it as a risk. And honestly, like upon reflection now, all of the times where I was close to that were because there was some underlying stuff going on in my life, and the LSAT really wasn't the cause. But having the specific pressure of like being a studying person while you also have all these other things going on is sometimes enough, even if you're not doing like 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
so
You were working full time when you were studying,
yeah,
right?
I was. Yeah, and I was doing it sort of backwards where I was studying after work, which was like my brain was already a little fried, but
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, so I think there were several times where I was like just scaling back to the hour a day. Just like really like don't do more than that. Like take do the prep and take your sections when you've decided to take them. Like I tried to accomplish a test a week for a lot of my prep.
Mm-hmm.
And then also like live classes to fill the space, or asynchronously watching live classes to fill the extra space. And I think that was a good balance because it's like the live classes are a little more interesting. Like it's a curated set of questions. There's something you're kind of like specifically getting from that prep, so you feel productive. And then the rest of it was a little more like volume and like maybe like just testing skills, like
Mm.
getting used to the sitting down for a number of hours and just looking
Mhm.
at like that.
Mhm.
Uh, Stamina, I guess is the word. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a blend.
Sure. You mentioned so the 4 or 5 times when you felt like you were approaching burnout. Can I ask what that felt like? Like, how did you recognize, "Oh, I think I'm approaching burnout?" Because, I mean, one of the things I do is for the LSAT Demon is I read the podcast emails people write into the podcast, and whether it's through that or through students, one question that we get is, "Could I be burned out?" Because it's a real thing, but it's also kind of a mystery in a way. Like, what do we actually mean when we talk about burnout? What does that feel like? So I'm interested to hear from you. Like, how did you experience burnout, or what was the feeling where you knew, hey, I need to be careful here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably maybe like 4 or 5 is a little bit, maybe that's too many for the full word burnout, but definitely there was more than twice where I was like, this is just getting to the point where I am like actually running on very little, and like I don't have productive test prep in me right now. And I
Mhm.
think honestly, like I think, you know, if you are questioning whether you're in burnout, that's maybe a sign that like it kind of doesn't matter if you like deserve to actually have the designation of burnout. Like you're burned out because if you're emailing somebody about it, like it's about to happen or it's happening right now. And I think like, you know, everybody questions it because you hear about people who are doing so much more. But like, I kind of think if you have underlying stuff going on, or you're just a particularly high anxiety test taker, or like you're thinking about the LSAT 24 hours a day, even when you're not prepping, like you could be burning out even if you're prepping, you know, a couple hours a day. Um, and so I think for me, like a couple of the times where like I was kind of like thoughts racing all the time about the test in ways that weren't productive and had nothing to do with what I was really doing.
Even when you weren't studying.
No, not when I was studying, not about what I had been studying, just about like, am I gonna get this done?
Yeah.
Am I gonna get this done in a year? Am I gonna be able to sit for June? Am I gonna be able to take the games? Like, I'm not really scoring very well on the games. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, if I have to take this in a month, should I move it? Should I not move it? Like, and then you're burned out because you thought about it all day, even though you didn't study. And so it was like, I was like, you know, my head was such a mess with thinking about it that I was like too exhausted to actually do what needed to be done, which was way easier than stressing about it. Like
Yeah.
sitting down and taking a section is so much more relaxing and doable than like sitting and stewing on it all day. But I had a couple times where I had to just like, you know, I'm going to take five days and I'm not going to think about it at all. And I'm not going to study because I can't approach studying without getting all of this extra noise. And it, like I'll do 2 hours a day next week when my head is a little bit less full of just nonsense.
Yeah. I want to amplify that. uh, Taking a break can be very helpful, and you're not going to regress during that time. You could step away. As far as I'm concerned, you could step away from this test if you need to for months and come back, and
Well,
you know
yeah. So
you're
one of the
and
times, one of the actual like experiences that I had was I went through like a pretty significant breakup during my LSAT prep, which I was
Mm.
like, oh my God, this is gonna just like the show is ruined. We're done. We're shutting down. Like I'll try again, you know, next year, whatever. And I took a month off, and I came back and I think I scored 8 points higher than I had when I took my last baseline or my last prep test after being so sad and not studying at all because it wasn't something I was thinking about. And so like I think like you won't lose any skills in a week or
yeah,
weeks or three. Like
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
it's a marathon, not a sprint. That is so true.
totally. Well, that's all great. It sounds like you managed your workload really well. I mean, eventually you got to this awesome score, 169. Did you take the test a couple times, or was that attempt number one?
Yeah, no, I did. I took it. I was signed up for June. I got very close to the June date and realized I wasn't scoring well enough on games and I wasn't confident enough on games to take it then. So I pushed out my test till August. And that was like maybe the best decision I made in the process. Like that made so much more sense. Um, and I mean, I did not strictly follow the demon's advice because I did sign up for test dates before I had necessarily like gotten the score that I was hoping for. But I also was within like striking range
Yeah,
enough. It still made sense.
yeah,
Um, and so yeah, I pushed it out to August, took it in August. I got a 163 and was like a little bit devastated about that because it was significantly below my test, like my um, practice tests at the time. I was like consistently like 168, 169, and then there was this, you know, first score. Um, and I was like, you know, whatever, like I'll come back from this. And so I just kept prepping. Kind of my practice scores actually didn't improve that much. Like they were still kind of in the 168, 169 range. But I decided to take October, and that's when I got a 169. And that was amazing, but I was also still signed up for November, and so I prepped the whole month from October to November, and I sat for it again. And that one I got a 168, so it did go down, which you know that does happen. But it was like that's how it goes. Like it's not a
sure.
perfect linear climb.
Yeah. No,
I'm pleased with my October score, and I'm very happy with where I ended up after my prep, and it works for, you know, what I want to do with law and law school.
yeah, you have every right to be ecstatic about that score, and you are right. The process of getting to your official score is not linear. There are ups and downs in your prep, and the process of those official tests is not entirely linear as well. Yeah, there's always going to be a range.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, I'm so thrilled for you, and big well done on making it through this journey. 146 to 169. Is that right? So 25 points of prep after you were freaking out because Reddit told you you would never improve by more than 10 points. You showed those Reddit haters wrong. Well done, Izah.
Thank you. Yeah. Don't
Cool.
listen to Reddit. That's the
Yeah.
lesson.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I want to give you the opportunity to leave our listeners with any final words of advice.
I think I think the biggest thing for me, you know, I was a very like um stressed test taker. I was a bit too focused on how I felt taking the test. I was a bit too focused on whether or not I was like focused enough or in the right mindset or like all of these different things. And like I think, you know, I listened to a show with somebody who had scored, I think, past like they were in the mid to high 170s, and they were talking about volume. And I think like my biggest takeaway was just that like it is kind of just about doing it over and over and over again, and doing it when you're stressed and doing it when you're happy and doing it when you're sad and doing it when you're hungry and tired, and like just you have to see it, you know, in all different phases. Like it's a long process, so you're going to just approach it from wherever you are that day, and as long as you approach it, like it really doesn't matter, you know, what the underlying situation is. Like that is a test prep day. If you did your test prep, it's a test prep day. Like that is what you need to eventually succeed. And like don't rush the process or feel too stressed about, you know, whether or not you're in the right place for it or whatever.
Great. Izah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And best of luck with your applications.
Thank you.
Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.